Teenage love is like a gentle spring breeze, pure and refreshing like the morning dew, yet bursting with passion and intensity. It marks the first stirrings of the heart, where unfiltered emotions light up young souls with wonder and yearning. Amid this whirlwind of feelings, there are those who love with unwavering devotion, giving their all without a second thought. However, such fiery love can sometimes lead to moments of blind infatuation, where reality blurs, and one lives solely for love, ready to sacrifice everything for the cherished one. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Your support fuels us to create even more amazing content. Now, join us as we dive into a captivating story of teenage love, a tale of innocent joy, fleeting sorrow, and timeless lessons that leave an indelible mark on the canvas of youth. When I was 2, I experienced my first real relationship, and I remember the excitement vividly. It felt like such a pivotal moment in my life. I was in my last semester of college, eagerly anticipating the future and all its promises. I was focused on finishing school, starting a career, and building the life I had always dreamed of. To me, everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place, as if the universe had aligned for me at last. It was during this time that I met him, my first boyfriend. James was a year older than me, a senior who I had seen around campus but had never really interacted with. When James first started talking to me, I couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this was destiny. The year was 2020, a strange and isolating time when the world was grappling with the pandemic. Stuck at home, taking classes online, life felt stagnant and uncertain. And then, out of nowhere, James reached out to me. It began with a simple message, a casual greeting that caught me off guard. I recognized him from campus, of course, but we had never been more than distant acquaintances. First, I was surprised James even knew who I was, let alone wanted to start a conversation. But James was friendly and warm, and our chats quickly became a regular part of my day. Before I knew it, we were talking every evening, sharing stories, dreams, and plans for the future. What struck me most about him was his certainty about life. One evening, James confided that James was looking for something serious, not just a fleeting romance. James wanted a relationship that would lead to marriage, a stable job, and a family. James even laid out his timeline: marriage by, financial security soon after, and kids in the years that followed. His confidence was magnetic. It felt reassuring in a world that was otherwise so uncertain. For someone like me, just stepping into adulthood and unsure of what lay ahead, his certainty felt like a lifeline. His dreams of stability and commitment mirrored the things I secretly yearned for, but had never dared to admit out loud. The idea of being part of such a clear and purposeful future felt almost intoxicating. But James wasn't the kind of person you might imagine when you think of a dream guy. James wasn't tall or conventionally attractive. In fact, his appearance was unconventional, even a bit awkward. His head was disproportionately large compared to his short, stocky frame, and his arms seemed oddly short, as though they didn't quite match his body. First, I noticed these quirks and hesitated, unsure of how I felt. Yet, his charm was undeniable. James had this way of talking that made you feel instantly at ease. His words carried a confidence that could convince anyone to see the world through his eyes. People often described him as persuasive, almost hypnotic in the way James could draw you in. With just a smile and a few well-chosen words, James had a way of making you believe in his vision. And James didn't just talk about vague ideas or fleeting goals. James painted vivid pictures of the future. James described the home James wanted to build, the career James was striving for, and the kind of partner James hoped to find. Each detail felt carefully considered, as though James had been planning this life for years. For someone like me, who was still trying to figure out what adulthood even meant, his clarity was mesmerizing. I found myself imagining a life with him, a life that felt stable and full of promise. His dreams became our shared dreams, and I began to believe that perhaps this was the start of something truly extraordinary. So, I said yes. I decided to take a leap of faith and see where this could lead. Over the next 5 months, our connection deepened. We talked every day, sometimes late into the night, sharing our hopes, fears, and secrets. James became my confidant, my best friend, and the person I thought I could trust with my whole heart. But as time passed, subtle cracks began to appear. First, they were easy to ignore, offhand comments or small actions that didn't sit right with me. I brushed them aside, convincing myself they didn't matter. After all, no one is perfect, and I wanted so desperately to believe in the version of him I had fallen for. Then, James began to open up about his past. James told me about his family, his childhood, and the struggles that had shaped him. First, I felt honored that James trusted me with such personal details. But as his stories grew darker, they left me feeling unsettled. James spoke about his father, a man James described as deeply abusive. His father's anger had cast a long shadow over their family, leaving emotional scars on him, his mother, and his younger sister. Hearing about his pain was heartbreaking, and I wanted to be there for him, to offer comfort and support. Little did I know, these revelations were just the beginning of a much more complicated and challenging journey. Growing up in a chaotic and emotionally volatile home, my boyfriend had unknowingly nurtured a deep well of anger within himself. It was as if the turbulence of his childhood had etched itself into his soul, and over time, that anger began to seep into our relationship in ways I hadn't initially noticed. First, it showed in small, fleeting moments, his frustration at minor inconveniences or his irritation when things didn't go his way. But gradually, his temper grew more unpredictable and alarming. If I made even the slightest mistake or did something that displeased him, his reaction would be swift and intense. James'd raise his voice, and his words, sharp as broken glass, would cut deep. Yet when James was the one at fault, his apologies came in a way that turned the blame back on me. James had a way of twisting situations so subtly that I'd find myself doubting my own feelings, questioning if I was, in fact, the one to blame. When I tried to stand up for myself, James dredged up old memories from my past, weaponizing my vulnerabilities to make me feel small and guilty. It was as though James needed to assert control, to always have the upper hand, and it left me feeling confused, hurt, and powerless. One day, James asked me a question that sent a chill down my spine, a question I couldn't shake, no matter how much I tried to dismiss it. With a strangely casual tone, James asked, "Would you still forgive me if I ever lost my temper and hit you by accident?" Those words echoed in my mind, wrapping around me like a suffocating fog. My stomach twisted into knots, and I felt a deep, instinctual fear. It was as if James was warning me, or perhaps preparing me, for a future I wasn't ready to face. Not long after, James revealed something that shattered the already fragile foundation of our relationship. Sitting me down, James confessed that James had been battling a serious illness for years, but had only recently been diagnosed. His face was a mix of vulnerability and defiance as James told me, but the way James withheld details made me uneasy. My heart raced as questions swirled in my mind. What was this illness? Could it change our future? When I pressed for answers, James brushed off my concerns, saying it wasn't a big deal and that James would explain everything in time. Eventually, the truth came out, and it hit me like a tidal wave. James had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, something James believed James had contracted through a blood transfusion as a child. His words were heavy with despair and desperation as James begged me to stay by his side. James promised that the illness wouldn't affect me or any children we might have, insisting that treatment would make things manageable. But deep inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. I wanted to trust him, to believe in his words, but something about the situation didn't feel right. Despite my fear and uncertainty, I stayed. I told myself I could handle it, that I could be strong for both of us. But every time I looked at him, fear gripped me like a vice. I couldn't bring myself to touch him without feeling a surge of anxiety. The once comfortable intimacy between us had been replaced by an invisible wall of dread. To his credit, James respected my boundaries, but the distance between us only grew. I began questioning my decision to stay, wondering if I was sacrificing my own well-being for a relationship that felt increasingly suffocating. Then, one night, an overwhelming sense of unease washed over me. It was as if my heart was screaming at me, warning me that I was making a terrible mistake. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger, not necessarily physical danger, but an emotional and spiritual danger that threatened to consume me. My mind became a battlefield of conflicting emotions. I couldn't focus on my studies, couldn't sleep at night, and felt trapped in an endless cycle of fear and doubt. For 2 agonizing weeks, I wrestled with my thoughts. Finally, I made the hardest decision of my life. I sent him a message, pouring out my heart, telling him I couldn't handle the weight of our relationship any longer. His response was as I expected, angry, hurt, and filled with venom. James called me cruel names, sent me messages laced with bitterness, and even wished harm upon me. The words stung, but at the same time, I felt an unexpected sense of freedom. It was as though a massive burden had been lifted from my shoulders, and I could finally breathe again. Months passed, and then I received the news. James had passed away. The terminal illness James had fought so fiercely had finally claimed him. James had been hospitalized with severe infections, and his body could no longer endure the battle. When I heard the news, my heart ached with a complicated mix of emotions. Guilt gnawed at me, whispering that I should have stayed, should have been there in his final moments. But alongside the guilt was a quiet sense of relief that I had chosen to protect myself, even when it felt selfish and heart-wrenching. In the months that followed, I grappled with these conflicting feelings. Some days, I questioned my decision, wondering if I had abandoned him in his darkest hour. Other days, I felt grateful that I had listened to my instincts and chosen a path that allowed me to reclaim my sense of peace and safety. I came to understand that it wasn't wrong to prioritize my own well-being, even if it meant letting go of someone I once cared for deeply. That relationship taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my life: the importance of trusting my inner voice. Even when the world around me feels uncertain and chaotic, life has a way of bringing people into our paths who challenge us, hurt us, and leave us questioning everything. But with every painful experience comes an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to choose a better future for ourselves. Looking back, I know now that walking away was the best decision I could have made for him, for me, and for the life I deserve. As I navigated through the next chapter of my life, I discovered a reservoir of inner strength I had never known existed. It wasn't easy, but I made a conscious decision to pour my energy into the things that truly mattered: my education, the friendships that uplifted me, and the dreams that once felt distant but now seemed within reach. I began to trust myself in ways I never had before, learning to value my own happiness and prioritize my well-being. Whenever feelings of sadness or guilt crept in, remnants of a past I was still healing from, I reminded myself of a simple but powerful truth: I deserved a love that was light, honest, and free of secrets. I longed for a relationship rooted in sincerity, kindness, and mutual respect, and I was determined to never settle for less again. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. One ordinary day, while spending time with friends, I met someone who would profoundly change my world. James wasn't the kind of person who immediately commanded attention with loud charisma or flashy charm. Instead, James had an understated warmth, a quiet kindness that drew me in like a gentle breeze on a sweltering day. His smile, genuine and unassuming, put me at ease almost instantly. What stood out most about him was how James interacted with me, not with grand gestures or overly rehearsed lines, but with a genuine curiosity about my life. James asked thoughtful questions about my day, listened intently to my stories, and made me feel as though my words truly mattered. It was refreshing, almost disarming, to meet someone so genuine. As we spent more time together, I began to see just how unique James was. James was incredibly patient, never rushing or pressuring me into anything I wasn't ready for. His respect for my boundaries was unwavering, a quality that felt almost revolutionary after the experiences I had endured. When James shared his feelings for me, James did so with an openness that felt both honest and reassuring. James spoke of his hopes for the future, but never tried to push me into anything beyond what I was ready to give. James wasn't just kind, James was steady, a grounding presence in a world that often felt chaotic. Over time, our connection deepened, We built something real, step by step, laying the foundation of trust and mutual support. James became my confidant, my partner in laughter, and the source of countless cherished memories. Our love grew not in dramatic, whirlwind moments, but in the quiet consistency of everyday life. Eventually, we decided to marry, and the day we exchanged vows was nothing short of magical. Surrounded by friends and family, the air was filled with hope, joy, and the promise of a future we would create together. Standing there, hand in hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as if every piece of my life had finally fallen into place. This man, my husband, had given me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to be completely myself. James saw me not as an idealized version of who I could be, but as the person I was, imperfections and all. Together, we began building a life rooted in love, respect, and a shared vision for the future. Every challenge we faced only brought us closer, strengthening the bond we had carefully nurtured. Looking back now, I can see how far I've come. The relationship with my ex-boyfriend was a difficult and painful chapter, one that left me with wounds but also with wisdom. It taught me the importance of listening to my instincts, even when doing so felt like the harder choice. Walking away wasn't just about leaving him, it was about choosing myself, valuing my worth, and refusing to settle for a love that didn't honor who I was. That experience, though difficult, prepared me for the love I eventually found, the love I knew I deserved. Life has a way of teaching us through the people we encounter, even those who hurt us. My ex played a role in shaping my story, not by being the hero, but by being a lesson in what not to accept. His memory remains a part of my past, but it no longer holds power over me. I've let go of the guilt, the lingering sadness, and the self-doubt, replacing them with hope, gratitude, and the promise of new beginnings. Meeting my husband felt like stepping into the light after years of wandering in the dark. James reminded me of what love should feel like: gentle, secure, and full of respect. Together, we've created a life filled with laughter, shared dreams, and unwavering support. And for that, I will always be grateful, not just to him, but to the version of myself who had the courage to let go of the past and embrace a brighter future.